Meeting is called to order at 7:03. Please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We need a motion for the approval of the open session minutes of November 19th, 2018.
Make a motion for the approval of the open session minutes, November 19th, 2018. Second.
Second.
Are there any changes, edits, or corrections needed? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Right. Next, we have student comments. Lily, are you here? Yes. Come on up.
So this week we participated.
You can come up to the table. It'll be fine. You're always welcome to sit with us as well. You don't have to sit in the audience.
So this week we participated in Wellness Week, and this was our first Wellness Week of the year. And as part of the week, school counselors brought civil community representatives, including therapy dogs, to the school. And the purpose of this was to give everyone strategies and experiences to help them stay healthy all year long. There were a lot of sessions offered during extra advisory sessions. Some of these focused on artwork, creativity, relaxation, and physical activity. The week started with Warrior Wind Down Week, which there was no homework for any of the students. And then as the week progressed, we had different themed days such as Tech Free Tuesday and Workout Wednesday. And this year we included a wellness fair that took place on Friday. And personally, that was one of my favorite things of Wellness Week because it was just like a big session where a bunch of students and others could just create like a stand and like display this things relating to wellness and such as nutrition, physical activity. And there was one stand where you could spell out your name using exercises, and another where you could create your own tea bag. And I thought that was pretty creative and fun. So this last Wednesday we had a school-wide concert, and upcoming this week we're planning on hosting it. We're going to use a different schedule that day to provide enough time for new musicians to perform their winter concert. And while the concert is going on, all teachers will work together to focus on interdisciplinary learning projects. And during that time, teachers will be treated to a breakfast that is hosted by Nipmuc Together. On Wednesday afternoon, we'll have a Lead Learner meeting, and Nipmuc is hosting its December Lead Learner meeting. And this will focus on community partnership projects. A variety of professionals and representatives from the community organizations will participate in the meeting. And the goal of this meeting is to create projects that allow students to learn the curriculum while also taking on a project that supports the community organization of a company. The hope is to create a partnership for each discipline by the end of the day on Wednesday. The portrait of the graduate is the last thing that NIMBC is planning on working on. And on December 18th, Mr. Clements and Mrs. Moran are planning on hosting a full-day workshop that focuses on creating a definition of success for each aspect of the portrait. And the day is designed as a workshop for about 25 students and whichever teachers are interested in participating. And the hope is to create a reflection guide and criteria for success that can be used by all the students. All district administrators have been invited to the last hour of the workshop, and the student-led work will take place on the 18th. It will be shared by the teachers after the session, and this will take them to the next step of adding their feedback. And in addition, this year's 21st Century Learning Conference will be directly linked to the portrait of the graduate, and all sessions offered are linked to the aspects of the portrait. And students will be asked to reflect on how the conference sessions will help them explore the portrait. NIMBC is excited about having this formal tool to assess progress with the portrait of the graduate by the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Very busy few weeks we have going on here. All right. Next item on the agenda is community comments. Is there anyone from the community who wishes to be heard at this point? Feel free.
Would you like me to yell or?
You may come forward, whatever you're comfortable with.
How about a chair over here, Lee? Maybe?
Sure.
Okay. That way we can hear him.
Hi, Dave Ross. I live here in Upton. My daughter goes to Memorial. We asked recently about adding a piece of equipment to the playground, a buddy bench. Administration told us the problem was that the school department does not own the land that the school is on, and therefore the school department is not in charge of the playground. It would be the Parks and Rec group who would be in charge of that piece of equipment at the school. I checked with the town manager, and he was surprised. He thought, although yes, the town technically owns the land, the school department could decide to put equipment out in the playground. So I'm just trying to find out what's the process in going forward and potentially adding this piece of equipment to the playground. Is it the understanding of this board that it's the Park and Rec's job, or is that for the school department?
Why don't you call my office and we can sit down and talk about this? I don't see this as being a terribly big issue as far as putting. Can you tell me a little bit more? I mean, I have an image in my head, but what exactly a buddy bench would be?
So a buddy bench, it's just a regular park bench.
Yeah.
And you would decorate it in some fun type manner, especially for elementary school kids. And the purpose of it is for a child maybe to go sit on the bench, and it's a way of passively saying, I'm looking for somebody to play with or talk to.
Yep.
And you look for your leaders in the school community, almost the students, to say, oh, little Susie needs somebody to play with, like let's go over and talk to her and something like that.
Okay.
So it's kind of allowing the students a way to say, hey, I want to play with somebody new, instead of having to go up and constantly ask and potentially be, no thanks, no thanks, no thanks.
Sure.
I think we have one at club.
Do we?
We have, I think we have a buddy
Okay.
bench at club.
Jay, you're not cognizant of this, are you?
It's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's so I'd be happy to discuss this in a lot more depth with you. Please contact my office tomorrow morning, and we could sit down and we could talk about it. I think there's a little bit of accuracy in the sense that technically, yes, the town of Upton does own the land, but however, the school district does have the authority and autonomy to make decisions regarding things like playground equipment and so on. So I'd be more than happy to engage you in that discussion.
Great, I just like to do whatever we can to make it happen.
Absolutely. It sounds, at face value, sounds like a wonderful idea.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Hearing none, we shall move on to superintendent's comment.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. First thing I'd like to share, and I ask that you all kind of bear with me, because this is 9 minutes in length, but I think it is well worth it, is I'd like to share a promotional video that was shared in the beginning of the school year, and it needed a little bit of editing, but I think the spirit is there. And it's a promotional video for our brand new strategic plan, Inspire. It features all of our stakeholders, but particularly people that were involved in our strategic planning committee, and I think it gives a very, very nice overview of the key components of the plan, and also specifically the portrait of the graduate competencies. So I will unveil this right now.
My name is John Dacey.
And I'm Michelle Godfrey.
I'm Jimmy Thrust.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Douglas.
Hi, I'm Eve Karen.
Hi, I'm Maureen Cohen. I'm Jennifer Mannion.
I'm John Clemens. My name is Mike Rubin.
My name is Marianne Moran. My name is Diane Duncan.
I'm Joe Chef.
And I'm a principal at Muskogee.
I'm a parent in Edmond, principal at Elk Regional High School.
I'm a senior and I'm the state officer for DECA.
I'm a history teacher at Muskogee Hill Middle School.
I'm a senior and I'm president of Regional Student Council. Also the president of the Men Upton Education Foundation. And I'm the associate principal at Buck Regional High School.
And I'm the assistant superintendent, and we are members of the Men Upton Strategic Planning Team.
I like most about the mission is the word thrive. We talked about this word a lot in the committee and what it meant to each of us. And I like that it implies unlimited possibility to be successful after graduation in any way that the learner decides to define success.
I think the important thing to know about our vision is to really focus on
things like meaningful learning and using authentic experience for our kids.
As a parent for my own children, I know that ultimately what I want for them is I want them to thrive. I don't know what their future holds exactly, but I know that I want them to be happy and healthy. I want them to find the joy in every day, and I want them to find their passions, truly get excited about giving back to the world and our community.
It's all about creating meaningful partnerships with our families and with the community, and really being able to take it to the next level.
What I'm most excited about when thinking about the portrait of the graduate is that it provides a K-12 guide for what teaching and learning looks like in this district. It's really exciting to me to think about a kindergartner entering school for the first time and learning skills that will be cultivated and grown over the course of their entire journey of years for our district. I think it provides a really powerful statement of what our kids are capable of as graduates.
The solution seeker aspect of the portrait of the graduate is something that really speaks to me. This is a life skill as much as a workplace requirement. Because at some point, at many points within the lives of our children, they will be required to solve a variety of problems, some big, some small, both in the workplace, in their community, and also in their personal and everyday lives. It is our responsibility to ensure that they have the tools and skills needed to be able to solve these problems, and that they are able to start practicing being a solution seeker from the very earliest ages.
So I think one of the skills that resonates most with me is that being an effective innovator and an inspired innovator. Our students are going to fail at more things than they succeed, and they're going to use that as an opportunity, we hope, to pick themselves back up and learn how to do something differently and to think about things differently. And what a great way for teachers to model as well, in that we use our feedback and we use each other to reflect on our practice, to get better at things. If anything I could really hope for my kids is that when they grow up, they'll really know how to learn, how to think, and how to make do in a lot of different situations.
I think the mindful learner aspect of the portrait of an MERSD graduate is important because it puts an emphasis not only on the student's education, but also their emotional and mental health. I think this is important because it's something that not all school districts put an emphasis on. And no matter how great a school district's education is, if a student doesn't feel that they're in a stable place mentally, they won't be able to learn to the best of their ability.
The aspect of the portrait of the graduate that resonates the most with me is the mindful learner. I think all of our students are diverse learners, but they're just diverse people. And we have to talk about what they need socially and emotionally so that they can be better prepared to be academic learners.
I am so excited about the global citizen competency that's in our plan. When I think about global citizen, I feel it locally, as far as globally within our own community, and valuing and respecting diversity and diversity of opinion. And then in the larger picture, global citizen of our students being able to connect, interact with their peers and expertise across the globe. That truly makes for powerful learning.
One aspect of the portrait of the graduate that I really liked and what resonates with me is the effective communicator. Now that's one that, a skill set that we are continuing, that we've been working on for years. But what I really like about our new portrait is the fact that it's involving multimedia technologies, and it's also including a variety of forms and contexts that we want our students to be communicating in, and I think that's a big difference.
I believe the collaboration aspect of the portrait of a graduate is important because students will need to collaborate in their future no matter what path they take. As an involved member of DECA, I've seen how collaboration is very important in an outside setting. And in this collaboration that the district has implemented this far, I've seen myself grow as a team player, and I look forward to seeing how our schools implement collaboration in creative ways in the future.
What I most enjoyed about the planning process was working with members of the community, including parents, because I feel that gave us a more inclusive document that's more authentic.
As a parent who's invested in this district and in this community, it was really energizing to me to be able to have this opportunity, and it allowed me to think creatively about some of the things that I can do personally to push our effort forward.
The part of the process I enjoyed the most was creating the MERSD portrait of a graduate. I like this because I felt that as a student myself, I could provide a unique perspective on students in the district and different needs in a classroom.
You know, there are some processes that you walk into and you don't really know what each person's role is going to be, and I really admire inclusiveness and the real team effort. And when you get a chance to really read through the final product, you look at it and you get a realization that it has so many different people's handprints and fingerprints on it, but they never lost sight of the students of Mendon Upton at the home.
A lot of things excite me about the plan, but I really think about it, what most excites me is the fact that it's really this opportunity for us to reimagine education.
What excites me most about this plan is being part of something that seems progressive and forward-thinking and truly what's best for kids in terms of learning.
I especially like how it refers to learners. It doesn't specify teachers, students, administrators, staff in the district, because truly, although students are our focus, if we don't have everyone on board as learners, then we can really thrive.
I think we are taking a risk and thinking a little bit outside of the box of how we're going to educate our kids.
Not many schools or districts are doing the type of work that Mendon Upton has detailed in the strategic plan.
It excites me because I see it as a call to action. A call to action to challenge the status quo, to challenge so many of the structures and practices that have been in place in our schools for many, many years that might not be quite so effective in giving our kids what they need for learning in a modern context.
Part of the strategic plan that I love the most is that it creates a bold, aspirational vision for learning in our schools. Through the plan, not only will our students achieve academically, but also become a little more curious, be creative, become motivated, get inspired. In short, I think it's a really powerful vision for learning. I'm proud to be a part of it.
So I apologize. I think we're having an issue with our Apple TV. We really don't talk that staccato-y. But the intent is to get this out into the community within the coming week. It'll be sent out to all of our parents. We'll also put this out vis-a-vis social media. And the intent also is to build a website exclusively around our strategic plan. MURSDinspire.com, which will be dedicated to all the various aspects of the strategic plan, but also the Portrait of a Graduate piece will also be a predominant role. So again, this is only a small snapshot, but I thought I'd like to share it out publicly so people can see the forethought that's gone into this plan. And I think moving forward, particularly in the budget cycle, people to have an understanding of where we're coming from as far as the imperative nature of the types of programs and services we want for our kids. Okay? Second piece that I have is something that we got some terrific news, I believe last Thursday, that for the second time in 5 years, our district has been named as an AP Honor Roll district by the College Board. Okay, so see, I even have the poster. I got a dozen of these shipped to me today. Voila, we will be proudly displaying this all throughout Nipmuc and also throughout the district. That for 2018, we are actually one of 373 districts across the United States and Canada that has been recognized for excellence in AP programming. And to be specific, the excellence is defined as not only how well the students are doing, but how many students are actually accessing AP coursework. So to put things in perspective, they look at a 3-year continuum. In 2016, we were doing actually quite well. 311 tests were administered to 155 students here at Nipmuc. And then this past spring, it's a total of 390 AP tests were administered to 197 students. So that's a real statistically large leap that we have. And again, and I know John Clements passionately believes this, a high tide raises all boats, so to speak. And when you hold students to that very high standard, more often than not, they live up to it. So in our percentage of students who had qualifying scores of 3 or higher also went up by approximately 3%, from 69.5% to 72.1%, which is excellent. So I think it's a huge testimony, first and foremost, to our teachers here at Nipmuc that work very, very hard. Being a former AP teacher myself, it is not easy work at all. But I think it also plans backwards, going back even to the elementary level, and giving our students what they need. So hats off to our staff and our students. I think it's a very nice designation. And last but not least, you do have in your packet the most current year-to-date expenditure report for the current fiscal year. Jay, is there any line items that you'd like to highlight?
Not really anything specific, one maybe, but we continue to be challenged by building maintenance issues all throughout the district. The only line item I would point out to is water and sewer at Clough School. The DEP has told us we need to replace the entire, pretty much all the equipment that's related to the water treatment system, even though what we had was working perfectly fine. We're about $14,000 over budget already, and I anticipate at least another $20,000 to $30,000 going into that system before it's all said and done. And it's just basically putting in new equipment in place of the stuff that's there. The water hasn't changed. The water's tested every month, just like it is at MISCO. It's fine. But I think they felt the equipment being 12, 14 years old, it was time to just put new stuff in. So that's what we're doing. Other than that, just we're plugging along.
And that's what I've got.
Next, we have subcommittee updates, the Superintendent's Evaluation Subcommittee.
Sorry, I was just looking through this budget. So we met on Monday, and Joe presented his plan for this year, and we talked a little bit about each item, which you're going to talk about tonight, and he tweaked a few things, added a few things, and he's going to kind of share it out with the entire school committee. Hopefully, everyone saw it when Joe sent the information for it, so they've had a chance to review it. But we're going to hear specifics of it right now with Joe.
Okay, super. In a very concise manner. So as you know, the educator evaluation model for all educators across the Commonwealth, myself included, is really this 5-step cycle. So we really are at the step around 2 o'clock or 2 or 3 o'clock on that cycle, where it's the actual formation of the goals and so on. Keep in mind, through the self-assessment process, I used, to a very, very high degree, the commentary that was given in my summative evaluation from the last, to really focus in on my student learning goal and professional practice goal, and actually the 3 highlighted district goals based upon the committee's feedback. So as you know, it is a student learning goal, a professional practice goal, and then 3 of the district highlighted goals Those 3 goals are from directly out of the district action plans that the committee approved back in October. So the student learning goal is around working with all stakeholders to further define the recently adopted 6 Portrait of a Graduate competencies, and ultimately the end goal being to develop concrete benchmarks to define student proficiency in each of them. Okay? Some of the key actions in each of them would be using a couple, a local and also a national resource, Ed Leader 21, and then also the Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Education Assessment as a resource, particularly around the student assessment piece, to help us cultivate more detail to each of those 6 competencies. I believe Lily discussed the special event that is occurring here at Nipmuc that really, I know John and Marianne are very excited about getting that student voice piece in each of them. Development and publication of materials, PR materials, to get out to our families, but also to the larger community. And the vision has been, what does that actually look like in student performance? And then why are each of these 6 competencies so important for college and beyond? And really highlighting the stories of specific students in our district. I think it goes without saying, I would say for the strategic plan, but also each of the 6 competencies to ensure that they are embedded very deeply within this coming fiscal year's budget and all the documentation and presentations. I think doing more work as far as it being a focus of our PD sessions, but also internally in staff meetings and common planning time and grade level meetings and so on. And then, as I said before, the creation of a draft list of probably grade span benchmarks for each of the 6 competencies. The second is my professional practice goal, and this really is based upon the recommendation of the summative evaluation around, as always, effective communication, but specifically effective communication around 3 key pieces. The new strategic plan, this coming year's operational budget, and then also the piece around the capital needs that are facing the district, particularly at the middle school. So some of the action plan steps that are there, I talked about PR materials regarding Inspire and also the profile of a graduate, but also the development and publication, like I said, of a specific website just around the strategic plan. My intent is to have something back to the committee in January with regard to further refinement of our capital project list. Again, linkage of the 6 POG competencies to this year's budget. I think it's really critical, unfortunately. I think we've had a span now of 2 years where the multi-board has been quasi-defunct. I think we need to revitalize it, particularly with regard to a robust discussion around our capital needs. And then last but not least, submitting a statement of interest in the Mass School Business Authority's Accelerated Repair Project, and really focusing it just on MISCO. I had the opportunity last month to have a very good conversation with the Assistant Director of MSBA about pragmatic tips in submitting an SOI. I know we put in one last year that kind of looked at the high school's roof. It turned out the feedback was we got very, very low points in the prioritization of it for the simple reason that there's a lot of other roofs out there that were much worse. And believe it or not, they consider a 20-year-old roof to not be very old by their standards. So that's another story. But I think being strategic about an SOI is incredibly important. So, and then last but not least, again, I won't get into the details as far as action plan steps for the simple reason that they're there in front of you, but we also discussed these back in October. Goal number one, providing coherency and consistency with homework strategies, really is about following up on the work of the homework committee and getting ongoing data and feedback about best practices with homework to make sure that it's commensurate with the new guidelines. The second piece is around improving school and classroom communication with our families and ensuring that there's greater consistency amongst our schools, but also in between individual classrooms, ensuring that there's effective communication between our educators and families. And then the third goal is around providing tiered SEL supports and interventions. And again, I believe at last meeting we had Jan and Deb present around a lot of the great work that's been going on with regard to the PBIS programs at the elementary levels. So it kind of really speaks to, from a district perspective, what's happening with regard to supports and interventions for our students. So last but not least, the timeline is we typically do each year, and this is at least the mid-cycle because of extenuating circumstances, and we got a little bit of a late start. What I'm proposing is to have the mid-cycle review at the meeting of March 25th, which would bring us approximately about 4 months out from here, and then the summative evaluation to be when it typically is, usually in that mid-September range. So reported out on September 23rd next school year. Okay, so that's very quick. That's in a nutshell. If anybody has any questions about the specifics of the plan, I'd be happy to address it.
Okay, I think Sean.
Yeah, so when we had talked about SEL, we had talked about having some sort of consistent feedback mechanism with the students, with the parents. Have you considered that as part of the plan? Having some sort of survey capability there?
Yeah, so I probably in the portrait of a graduate development, and I could be a little bit more explicit about the key action in number 2. The vision is to have a mechanism of quick push surveys vis-a-vis, in all likelihood, it's going to be through text messaging capability, using specific sample sizes.
Right.
So not necessarily doing a whole school or whole parent group. So if you look at key action number 2, it kind of talks about obtaining data on quality of school programs and practices.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what I'm referring to there. If you want me to be more explicit about including SEL structures or practices, I can certainly do that.
Yeah, that's great. That would satisfy that.
Yeah.
I just want to comment on the goal 1 and goal 2. I'm so excited about those 2 things.
Oh, thank you.
Because I think you've really encapsulated the goals and the line items very, very well. You can see the growth through the last couple of years. So my compliments on those. Those look really exciting.
Thank you.
On the homework goals, I don't know where to go exactly on that. My feeling is, from the work that's been done, it's an awesome step forward from where we were. But I think we need at least 2 of the practices that are mentioned in the homework goals have been around consistently for years. Those have been suggestions that we've been made many, many years ago, and we haven't had any improvements on those things. And specifically, I'm talking about the coordination between staff around homework, right, and around sports and around activities, around teamwork, those types of things that require a lot more effort out our students than each individual teacher realizes, okay? And that one I think, having been thrown into that quagmire myself, I don't think it's any individual teacher's responsibility to maintain that. And I think even though every teacher I've talked to has tried in earnest to accomplish something that was best for their students, we still haven't been able to coordinate anything as a district. So I think we need something a little bit more formal so that the district supports the teachers in their practices around giving homework on, let's call it off days, or on a homework schedule, or on a very simple framework. So I was thinking the mechanism to do that would be a policy. So that's an example. I know in Maureen's guidelines, I think you said where possible, coordinate homework schedules where possible. And I think that's a little bit too loose. I think we have to take a more concerted effort to do that. So I'd be happy to discuss how we accomplish that. I think there's, in terms of how we give out homework relative to the, if any kind of mistake happens relative to the amount of homework that we're giving out, and this is a complicated topic, which is why I'd rather discuss it.
Yeah.
But just as I'm throwing something out there.
I mean, I'm smelling a future agenda item here, Sean.
Well, then maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. But the idea there would be, if we get so much homework, pretty much by coincidence, it's not anybody's fault, but we get so much work to do that it forces the kid to stay up until 3 or 4 in the morning to get it done. That's not good. That's bad for health, and it actually creates a situation where the recovery process for that late night will now last for an entire week or 2 weeks.
Sure.
So those types of things, I'd love it if there was some sort of stopgap to prevent that from happening, so that we get a good kid who should be performing well, and instead they spiral downward over the next couple of weeks trying to recover from that event.
But I
And
think part of it too, Sean, is having something in place to kind of keep track of our students. Because for one student, what may bring them up to 2 in the morning, another kid might be going to bed at 9:30 or 10 o'clock. You know what I mean? And I think that kid who is staying up to 2 o'clock in the morning, we need to keep an eye on them.
Yeah, therein
There's
lies
got
the
to be
complexity.
some way that we're figuring out that this is not a good trend for this student, and we need to intervene to make sure that we can keep them in their mental health in check.
Absolutely, and not only that, but are the kids' homework practices even healthy for them? Are we starting to discover something about that kid's personality which needs some sort of intervention?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Exactly
absolutely,
what I'm saying.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, is there just a deep-seated lack of organizational skills that really we
That
could
we could
use
be
some
addressing.
coaching?
Yeah.
You know? So, or is there a misunderstanding in the requirements for the homework? I know the guidelines address some of that. So there's so many positive steps that we've taken for this. I think we just need one more step to set some of these things in as like the borderline that we can't cross. Let me put it that way. Absolutely.
Can I add something? So I think we're starting to roll out the guidelines right now, communicating them out, but start to have the meetings at the faculty meetings and then at different grade levels. So we have a plan to work the staff through different protocols over the course of this January, starting in January into the spring, to start getting them used to the different aspects of it and then addressing areas of need. So, I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. I would recommend, though, at least to the point of us rolling it out in the implementation plan that we have this year, we're going to come back to it and assess where we're at and what need. We know this is also it takes time when you're doing a systemic change. So we'll start to get feedback of what's going well, what's not going well later on in the year too. So I know on our end we'll have a lot more details once we're really talking about it and starting to make some collective changes too. But we put a few things in place that will start to be implemented starting in
Okay, so
January.
let me spit back what you just said, because I like it. So if we say something like we're going to learn for the next 6 months based on the guidelines and the feedback and the process we're already undertaking, then we can come back and make suggestions where necessary to build policy or to build that
I would
borderline
wait
can't
to
cross.
see how we are able to implement it, and then look to see if there are areas that you think you would want to have, policy that address specific, issues or clarifications. We purposely, like I said at the presentation, tried to make it broader guidelines because they're going to be interpreted, they go into place at different levels in different ways. So that was our task, to try to give some guidance, but it's possible that you may find that it's not hitting all the areas, and you'd want to take a look at it. But I would give it some time for us to actually do that process first.
Okay, I love that. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up relative to this is something in future agenda items.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm sitting here looking at the the alternative structured day learning. I'm really excited about this one too.
All right,
but you'll notice that in the middle of this, it has assessments of how many hours each kid took to. I mean, it's right in there.
I will talk about that when we get there.
So here are the things that I'm looking for.
Dude, you're on fire tonight.
No, but it seems like a lot of this is common sense.
Yeah.
And I really don't blame the staff at all or the teachers at all for this. This is a coordination problem across the whole school.
Sure.
I also think it's just a different mindset of what homework is for, and I don't know, I just feel like there has to be a feedback loop. You're talking about monitoring it, Maureen, but I feel like the students have to be involved in that feedback loop of what is it looking like for them night to night. And I think it's such a hard thing to gauge, because you're talking about coordinations across teams on how much homework they're given, and every student looks different, because not every student is involved in the same classwork, from the different classes that they're taking at the high school. So it's really difficult to get that data that's going to help you improve your systems, but I think it's vital. And I'd love to see, actually, Joe, we talk a lot about surveying, but like within this providing coherency and consistency with homework strategies, something about surveying our students and making them a big part of our feedback loop, because that's where we're going to get our information. Mm-hmm. And we're doing this because it's better for students and it's better for learning.
And I also think it's better for the teachers. They're going to start to, honestly, they're going to see so much data and so much understanding about each individual kid above just what the kid has told them, that I think their whole professional career is going to develop faster than most of their compatriots at other schools. I think we have an opportunity here to have more of a personalized learning approach and really improve our whole product, which is our education to our kids. So,
Goal number 1.
Okay, yep, got it.
Right.
Yep, got it. Okay, sorry.
That was your feedback.
Yep.
Monday night.
Okay, perfect. Sorry.
I do listen every once in a while.
You listen all the time. You listen all the time.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments on the superintendent's annual plan for 2018-19? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the superintendent's annual plan.
so with the caveat that we'll make the edits that we discussed? Or?
Yes.
Okay, motion to approve the 2019 plan for Dr. Moschek.
Second. Okay, any further questions? All right, the motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the superintendent's annual plan for 2018-19 is approved unanimously. Next, we move on to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business before the body that we need to entertain?
So where would I suggest that we have an agenda item to follow up on what we just discussed?
Under future agenda items?
Yeah.
Future agenda. Oh,
so noted.
Interesting.
Hence the name.
Yeah, that would be good to put it there. Hey, there's so many times when I can be out of order. Might as well just experiment with it.
Some pieces of unfinished business that we need to entertain. All right, hearing none, moving on to new business. So, Mercy Spanish Immersion Program Evaluation.
Okay. I'm super excited to introduce Amanda Seawald this evening. Amanda, as you know, was in our district for 3 days back in October for the purpose of evaluating, actually I should say reviewing our Spanish immersion program. As I say in the background notes, Amanda has extensive experience working with numerous districts throughout the country. She's also worked as a consultant to the state of Delaware in their immersion programs, and also with the American Council of Foreign Language Teachers. So Amanda's going to kind of give an overview of her findings that she has in the report, and then would be more than happy to take your questions. Okay, so real basic, just if you want to advance it, click to the right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me here tonight. I'm thrilled to be here. It was my pleasure to visit your classrooms and to meet all of your incredible community members in October. Visiting the classrooms was a highlight for me. You've been doing this for so long, and your teachers are amazing. They truly are amazing. And then I had the incredible opportunity to meet with so many parents, and that's unusual for me. In a lot of districts, I don't have the chance to meet with as many parents as I was able to meet with here, and I really loved that opportunity. The piece for me that really stood out, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, was the opportunity to meet with some of your seniors, some of your students who've been in the program for so long, and to spend an entire class period talking to them and speaking with them and discussing some really important issues in Spanish, which I thought was a great experience, and also told me a lot about how important this program is to this community. So thank you very much for having me here. And the goal of this program review was really to take all of these stakeholder perspectives and approach this program as such an asset to the community and to the educational opportunities here, and think about how we can take all of the pieces that are so bold and wonderful here and improve upon them. And improve upon them in a way that expands the program, that sustains the program, and gives it the life that it needs and all of the pieces that it needs in order to continue to be successful and even to grow. Some of those pieces include curriculum and resources, looking at instructional strategies and program design, and also really strongly focused on community. And we'll talk a lot more about that. One of the other things that came up for me as I was looking at this, and based on some of the discussions that I had, was the concept of addressing outcomes, overarching goals for the program, as well as assessment procedures. So I'm going to try and do this very quickly. It's a long report, but I want to just make sure I share some of these ideas with you. Okay, so the first idea is the curriculum materials and resources. The great thing is that you have a lot of these materials already in place. The challenge with picking the right instructional resources for your program is always, with dual language immersion, one of the challenges is that what you think will be the mirror of what is going on at that grade level in English in that content area is not always exactly what you need in the other side, in the immersion program. Because in the second language, it's still their second language. And it's not an exact equivalence for English language arts and for science and for math. Sometimes the language, the comprehensible input has to be adjusted in order to allow for the students to really grasp the concepts. So sometimes what we need to do is we need to look at what are those resources that you're using, and how can we find the resources that make it so that the students can really grow in that area of learning. My suggestions in this area, one of the things that stands out is the way that phonemic awareness develops in Spanish versus English. In English, obviously the students learn about the letters and the individual sounds. We do chunking. In Spanish, it's syllabic development. And so there are some great programs out there. One of them that stands out is Estrellita, which is a wonderful program that can be used K1 to help develop stronger literacy skills. Then some of the other things that we're looking at is that the social studies, standards are changing. So we're looking at how can we adjust what the tools are being used in social studies to make sure that we have the right resources for interpretive reading growth and to make sure that it's comprehensible to the students. Your science program is one of those pieces that I know is such a valuable tool in English, and we're trying to figure out how do we find the right tools to make sure that we're able to appropriately address those same concepts in Spanish. So this is something that I feel that needs to happen as a committee with teachers. I think that it's something that the teachers take a look at what we've got. what exists in each area of instruction, really looks at what the challenges are that they face with regard to comprehensibility and where are the problem-solving pieces, what is the critical thinking going on for the students in each content area, and is that resource really fulfilling that need? Then I think we'll be able to move forward and just choose the right resources. Some of them will be the same, some of them will be slightly adjusted to make sure that we're meeting needs. Hello.
There's,
Is it
sometimes
glitching?
there's, a little bit of a
Okay.
delay with the Apple TV.
Thank you. Instructional strategies. So this is a very important category for us, right? Is how are we making sure that we're empowering our teachers with the tools and the strategies that they need to reach all learners? How are we making sure that all learners are getting what they need in order to achieve? And so what we look at in this is we're focusing on the ideas of how do we take what's going on and find the strategies that will allow all learners to grow. And I have to say that right now you have some of the most energetic teachers who are employing so many various strategies. What I think is interesting is I can go into classrooms in all different districts around the country and not see what I was able to see in your classrooms. Your teachers are using learning centers. They're using different strategies to reach your learners. They're really making such an incredible effort to make sure that all learners' needs are addressed. But what I think that they need is some really targeted professional development that will help them focus on what the big key is here. The big key is proficiency growth. And that's the piece, that's the metric for growth in immersion education that I think that your district desperately needs to grow with and focus on in order to show all the incredible things that you're doing. It's being done, but it's not being focused on through the perspective of proficiency. Let me take a step back and just explain a little bit about proficiency, and I promise I'll be fast. But I think it's important. So years ago, we used to think about language learning as, are you fluent? Are you bilingual? But there was no way of measuring that. There was no real way to measure fluency. There was nothing that, like, no kind of structure that allowed that. So years ago, the American Council on Teaching of Foreign Languages, in collaboration with some other language groups, including the Center for Applied Linguistics, developed proficiency scales. The proficiency scale looks at novice, intermediate, and advanced learners and helps within those categories, breaks it down into 3 to 5 categories at each level. Because language learning is not a year-to-year thing. You don't go from novice to intermediate to advanced right away. As you know, I know that you've been working very hard on your language growth, right? You can be a novice mid-learner for several years. In fact, in the United States, high school students usually graduate with something between a novice low and novice mid level of proficiency, which means that they can probably string maybe 2 or 3 sentences together, if that. Your students are doing much more than that already. They're already able to do that across the different modes of communication. So I know this is like fast, and we can do another one of these another time if you want, but the 3 modes of communication are very easy because they're all based on the concepts of speaking and reading and listening and writing, but they're interpretive, which is listening and viewing and reading. Interpersonal, which is spontaneous conversation, and presentational, which is planned writing and planned speaking. If you've ever taken a language course in the United States and you grew up here or you had an opportunity, you've done a lot of presentational stuff. Somebody told you to write a dialogue, right? Somebody told you to make a menu for a restaurant, right? That's presentational. We've always been very good at that in our field. But immersion education flips everything on its head and allows all of these modes to be really focused on from an early age, allowing biliteracy to develop along with proficiency. So I wanted to just take a moment and explain that. There are great measurements of proficiency now. And so that's where a lot of these ideas and these suggestions are focused. So I see your teachers doing so much. I'm thinking. It's thinking. There. Okay. What I think we need, what I think we could really focus on in instructional strategies is trying to keep the students in the target language. This is a very challenging thing. World language classrooms, immersion classrooms struggle with this all the time. Getting the students, we know that the teachers are speaking 100% of the language and they're incredible. I had the chance to watch and they're incredible. But the challenge is getting the students in social and academic interactions to speak to each other in the language. So we have to put structures in place and establish routines that encourage that, as well as some type of consistent system for measuring that and for watching that. We also want to make sure that we look at the language change. Your program goes K through 2, 100%, so there is no language change during the day. They're in Spanish the whole day. But from third grade through, I'd say, 5th grade, they're really, and 6th grade, they're looking at different changes across the day. In 5th and 6th, it's harder because they're going across the day in different classes in the middle school. But in 3rd and 4th grade, it's very important for us to focus on the idea of if you're doing English and social studies in English, it should either be at the beginning of the day or at the other half of the day. It shouldn't be that you go English language arts, then Spanish language arts, then math and Spanish, then social studies and English. By doing that, we're kind of defeating the structure of keeping them in the language. So some of this is about organizing the day so that the program flows in a way that does not impede proficiency, but will grow in proficiency. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. And then some of the other suggestions that I have, of course, is to look at everything from the perspective of proficiency, not just what's going on, what it means to be proficient, but also how are teachers planning and instructing and assessing along those lines. And I feel very strongly that it would be very valuable for the district to establish a relationship with a university in Massachusetts that has a teacher ed program. By doing that, you can create a pipeline for field experience, for potential new teachers, for all of these other bilingual possibilities down the road that can really serve your purposes. So these are just a couple of ideas. I feel also that the 7-8 program is a very important area for us to focus on. I think that we can build a lot more literacy in 7th and 8th grade immersion classes if we make sure that we honor their experiences K through 6. And what that means is taking all of the knowledge that they have in content learning and making sure that they're applying that in a context that helps them grow their literacy skills in 7th and 8th grade and doesn't reduce it to a traditional grammar-based and vocabulary-based experience that's based on topics. So that's something I would like to focus on as well. Now, of course, one other thing that I do want to mention is RTI and special education services. I think that your district would benefit greatly from by prioritizing this. With your human resources plans and in everything that you do, I think that the idea of having special educators available who are bilingual would make a big difference, because then the students who are in K through 2 and 100% Spanish would still be able to receive services if they have an IEP in the Spanish language, as opposed to being pulled out and have to have those services in English. And I think that that's an important factor. We're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the program design in just a minute. This is a quote from a very recent study, the most recent study, one of the biggest studies ever done on immersion education in the United States. It was done by the USDOE and the American Institutes for Research. And one of the points that I wanted to focus on here is this idea of creating these goals, these proficiency goals and levels, so that there's some type of clear scaffold, and that scaffold is not only available to teachers, but that it's also important for students and parents to understand that. I know that one of the challenges that parents mentioned was really understanding what the expectation was for linguistic growth each year. And I think that that's an important consideration. The more we're all aware of what the goals are and it's clear to the students, and in fact, it will help them grow. So now let's talk about program design. One of the goals that was discussed with me was the idea of having 2 cohorts, one in each community. Though I think that this is a very lovely goal, there is a challenge that you face when you have only one strand in any given school. This is an important concern. I taught in a school like this, so I want to share that I had this experience when I first began my career in Arlington, Virginia. We had one strand that was Spanish dual language immersion, and the rest of the school was regular. And really what happened was that the Spanish dual language immersion strand became separated from the rest of the school in some way, by virtue of the fact that the students needed to stay in the language for that time. But I think that that also poses a challenge for making sure that we adjust the classes, that we're sure that students have the opportunity to interact. So this is something that we have to look at more carefully and consider how we can grow it. Maybe down the road you can have two strands in each elementary school. That would be amazing. But I do think that we have to think about the way that this impacts social growth and linguistic growth for the students, and how it impacts the community. So best practices for maintaining student enrollment. So this is kind of like the recruitment, retention, attrition, oh my segment. And what I want to focus on here is this idea of the 100% which is huge. It's wonderful that you keep your students K through 2 100% immersed. It's really a great model because it does help them build a great deal. It does also present a challenge, which we'll discuss a little bit more in a moment. I think that the flexible programming, where you're moving them into more of a percentage of English and that you're dividing the content a little bit more from grades 3 through 6 is such a strong model right now. I think it really needs to continue that way and work on resource development. And then we talk about high school. And I was thrilled to meet with the administration in the high school. I'm glad John's here tonight. Because one of the most exciting things for me to learn in your community is how open you are to creating experiences, experiential learning type opportunities for your high school immersion students, for all of your students, but certainly for your high school immersion students, that again will honor the experience they have in linguistic growth, but combine that with cultural growth and understanding of critical thinking in the language. One of the pieces that I think that we don't talk about enough in language learning is that language learning is for a purpose. The purpose is to solve problems, communicate, and think in the language. So I think that that's one of the pieces here that's important. Something could go on from here. Here's the piece that I think is important. So if you were to consider, there are several models for dual language immersion across the country. 50-50 model is what the state of Utah does, it's what the state of Delaware does, and there are several models like that across the country where the students learn half the day in Spanish, or the one partner language, half the day in the other language. 90-10 is also a common model. 90-10 basically goes from that 100% and just takes 10% of the day that is then focused on English language arts development. That's usually the way it is, and a little bit of content support. Right, mirroring, we call it, mirroring the content that's being taught in the other language. The reason why that is an important consideration is because if you were to move your model to a 90-10 model rather than 100% K through 2, you would be allowing for a few different things. Students with IEPs, students who need RTI would be able to get their English language RTI and special services in English during that 10% time. It would not require them to be pulled out of the Spanish side of the day, which would then leave them behind on some level right now when they're being pulled out. The other piece is that I think it also opens up some possibilities for recruitment, and I think it also helps with retention. One of the things that happened during my meetings with parents was that they expressed that there was a concern about not really knowing and trying to convince parents to put their kids in the program, knowing that they were fully responsible for English literacy development at home. It's a lot. It's a lot for a parent to take on, even if they're completely into it. It's a lot for them to take on. And so I think that the 90-10 model presents a very interesting option for this community that I think should be discussed further. And that, of course, goes back to the idea of offering special education services in the Spanish language as well. I think that's something that's not an if you move to a 90-10 model or not. I still think that that's a very important priority in this district. And one other thing I do want to mention here, because I want to keep moving, I know there's a lot, is this idea of contextualizing the 7th, 8th curriculum and the 7th, 8th program design. One of the ways that I would look at doing that, and I've done this in other districts, is to focus on the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals, which mirror the AP Global strands. All of these things are about global issues, and doing this in the language, in the partner language, in the target language, and focusing on these ideas that are problem solving on giant global issues, including hunger and poverty and climate change, would really help bolster the program and the students' ability to function in the language. So, and that's something that I know that you recently included in one of your presentations as well. So now we move to what I think is the big piece here, one of the biggest pieces. All of these other pieces are extremely important to the daily functioning of the program and the overarching goal to grow proficiency in our learners, to make sure that they can function in the language. But one of the pieces that came up again and again in all of my meetings with every stakeholder was this idea of the community and the perceptions of the students who are in, and the families that are in the program, and the perceptions by families who are not in the program. This can be a subject that's challenging at times. But I think that you have incredible community support for this program and for its immersion in general. You have wonderful parent support, students and teachers, and everyone, teachers in the survey that we did for teachers, almost every single one of them said they absolutely love it. The line goes really high on the graph showing us that they absolutely love teaching in your district. You have an international night already that I know Katie works on a great deal. And you have a superintendent who is clearly devoted to this because he's invested in his own language learning as a part of it. And you have a strategic plan that really focuses on the need to do this. So because you have all of these things, I think that growing this community idea goes to some very big concepts. The first is this idea of the 90-10 model, which I think would open up the possibility of increasing recruitment, which I know is something we discussed in the meeting that we had, the parent meeting, and how important that experience was. I think that would help a great deal. Also, having this district-wide global engagement goal, I think playing on that, taking your strategic plan, and really thinking about how that impacts everyone in the district is important. Immersion education should be for all learners. And in doing a 90-10 model, or in also making sure that your entrance practices include students with learning challenges, you make sure that the program really is open to everyone. It never feels like it's closed. It never feels like it's only for certain students. And that is one of the most important things that can happen here in order to get us to a point where everyone in the district owns the importance of global learning and language learning. And I say that because I think one of the pieces that really needs to be worked on in the district is outside of the immersion program. And that's the concept of world language learning from an early age in an articulated, a clearly articulated and meaningful way that's focused on proficiency as well. That starts with a FLES program, a foreign language in the elementary school program, which I know in this district has been discussed, and that at one point was an after-school model, pilot model. But I think that incorporating this for all students, so that the students in the elementary school who are in the Spanish immersion program aren't the Spanish kids anymore, but that everybody's learning, and that there are lots of things going on so that everyone's focused on how important it is to be able to communicate. I think that would change things. I also think that in the high school, in the middle school, having some type of learning minimum or clear expectation for language learning as a part of a graduation requirement would be a very important investment for you as a district. And I say that because the Seal of Biliteracy was just passed in the state of Massachusetts. The Seal of Biliteracy is an extremely important metric that states around the country are now incorporating. So students can receive something on their diploma or on their transcript that goes with them to the colleges they apply to that expresses what their level of proficiency is in a language. This is important. This makes a difference. And the reason I can tell you it makes a difference is because I worked on getting this signed into law in New Jersey. And the minute we got it signed into law, the next phone call I got was from a real estate agent. And I said, huh? And they said, well, we need to know which districts are offering the Seal of Biliteracy as an option for students who are going to graduate from the district. And I said, can you tell me what you're going to do with this information? And they said they're going to write it into all of the profiles of the districts so that when people come to move to the area, they can see that as an asset to moving into that district. I think this is something bigger than what we can even think about. I think that having that global focus and thinking about that will help all of your students in the district, not just the immersion students. And of course, I think that efforts to mix the students at an early age would really benefit the schools. You have a one-way dual language immersion program. That means that all of your students primarily are native English speakers. And this is a quote from that same study. Even though one-way programs don't have the built-in linguistic diversity that you would look for in a two-way dual language immersion program, paying close attention to the social context of things, making sure that we're paying attention to the ways in which we're getting our students to socialize and think about global learning and language is a very important piece of success in dual language immersion, especially in one-way dual language immersion. And giving the experience of multilingualism and cross-cultural understanding to every student in the district, I know is a priority here. So that's a way that I think it could really even improve the profile of the program. And finally, the last section is addressing outcomes and assessment. It came to my attention as I did this that you are not doing proficiency assessments. And there are standardized proficiency assessments that can be used. The APPLE assessment, which was created by ACTFL, the American Council Teaching of Foreign Languages, and the STAMP assessment. Both of these assessments are being used across the country. They are also acceptable tools for demonstrating biliteracy growth for the Seal of Biliteracy. These can be done not only at the high school level, but at different intervals at elementary and middle school. Then we can usually look at different aspects of learning. It could be that we're just looking at interpersonal listening or interpretive listening or interpersonal speaking. It could be that later we're looking at presentational writing. But that what we're trying to do is assess where students are at each level, set goals for those levels, and then continue that consistent process of assessing in that way. By setting up a plan or looking at these assessment tools with a committee of teachers, I think you could find that this will also impact instruction and planning and really make a difference in the way that we motivate our learners. Not specifically for the test, just the opposite. The way that these tests are designed, it's not a content measure. It's a measure of how you function in the language. It's a measure of what you can do with language. And you can see that the feedback that is given by the providers of these tests really are very specific indicators, specific progress indicators that not only tell you, and you can see samples of these online, by the way, you can see the reports and the actual tests online, that it doesn't only tell you where your student is on the novice scale or on the intermediate scale, it also tells you what the student needs to do to move to the next level, which is some of the most important information that we can get as parents, that your students can have, and certainly that the teachers can have in order to move them forward. And finally, the last piece is this idea of a digital portfolio system. There's a program called Linguafolio, which was developed to track linguistic development of students over the years. Linguafolio is a great tool. It's not the best tool, but it's that concept of a digital portfolio that we can work with to develop something specific to your needs so that we track student growth and proficiency and what they're able to do with the language over a longitudinal period. And I think that that will make a difference in the way that your students are able to show what they know, feel proud of what they're doing, and certainly when we think about attrition, I think you'll see less attrition when you have a way to demonstrate the student's growth and where parents can see it and students can see it and they feel motivated by what they're doing. And the last piece is, of course, educate your parents about proficiency. We all need to learn about it because it's not something that you walk around knowing. The 3 modes of communication is something that I know because it's something I talk about every single day. But I can tell you that from the teachers to the students to the parents and to the administration, it's important for proficiency to be the goal here. And if you look at everything through the perspective of proficiency, I think you'll see that what you're already doing is quite exceptional here in the district. And we just want to be able to show that and grow that. Finally, right here I have some research, current research in the area. These are all live links, and I'm sure that you can share the presentation. And any questions that you have, I think you'll find. The last one here is called America's Languages, Investing in Language Education for the 21st Century. This was a congressionally commissioned study done by the American Academy of Arts and Science, and it was a bipartisan commission from Congress to do this study. It was the first one in over 20 years of language study in the United States. Very valuable to us in our field. So beyond this, you'll see that we did three surveys, and the 3 surveys were of teachers, students, and parents. And the results of those surveys, some of the information from those you'll find past these slides right here. I'm not going to take you through all of them, we don't have time. But I want to leave you with this quote. My incredible friend and a colleague, Greg Roberts, who is the grandfather of dual language immersion in the state of Utah, got the governor of Utah years ago to say we're going to do a statewide initiative. Invest millions of dollars in a statewide initiative where many different languages are being taught in an immersion setting across the entire state. And he ran that program for years, recently retired, and he's now working with the American Councils of International Education to promote dual language immersion and to start that dual language immersion alliance, which I would hope that your district will join. This is his quote, and I think nothing is truer than this. If we can give our students the gift of communication and critical thinking in another language, then they're going to be able to succeed in anything they try to do. So I thank you so much for your time tonight, and I'm glad to take any questions. Yes, sir.
Thank you for this presentation. It's fantastic. After looking at all this information, it's hard for me. It's a shock and blast of information, but
sorry.
Oh, no problem. It's more my fault. What do you think that we're doing that is unusual? And what I mean by that, unusual in good ways or bad ways. So is there anything that we're doing that's innovative, for instance?
One of the things that I think, well, first of all, your exchange program is extremely innovative. The fact that you're not only doing it by taking the kids over there, but that you're incorporating this exchange across the different age levels and during the school year, I think is extremely important, making those connections. I think that the 100% is innovative. I do think it is. But I think that the challenge that exists, if you had a school where the entire school was an immersion school, as opposed to it being one strand within a school, I think that that model would be phenomenal. As long as you have the support of parents at home and you have that type of structure. I think that's you're focusing on literacy growth at the early age and understanding how important that is at an early age. And I think that's very important. The other piece of what I think you're doing incredibly well is finding teachers who get it. They get what it is to teach via the language rather than teaching about a language. They understand how important it is, not just for cognitive growth for the students, but for their ability to do things with the language, to function in the language. And I think that that's, and just the fact that you have a dual language immersion program, may I tell you, you are miles ahead of my entire state. I'll just say I'm from New Jersey. We've only got like 2 programs across the entire state. Massachusetts has had programs for years, and yours is one of the longest standing ones. So to me, you've been ahead of the game this whole time. All it requires now is to take a step back and reflect and build on that success. Things that I think that the other side of it is I think that 100%, because it's just a strand, stands in the way of recruiting larger groups, recruiting more students, gaining the buy-in of parents who are nervous about that, about making that commitment in that way. And I think one of the other things is focusing on it as a program that is for certain kids and not for all kids. And I don't think that that's at all something that the district has tried to do, but that I think that that's kind of been a byproduct of the fact that it's a smaller section within the schools. And I think that's something we can certainly work on. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And then there's, for any parents who are scared, the things that I've heard about it is it holds your kids back for the first few years, but then if they stick with it, they'll end up accelerated beyond where they would have been.
Well, absolutely, and it doesn't really hold them back. It's just that the languages develop at a different level. And again, the 100% does have an impact on that, because there is literally zero instruction, and it really depends on the individual students. Your students at home are probably getting a lot from you at home, whereas maybe there are other parents who maybe either haven't had the time or haven't been able to commit to it in the same way. Maybe some of those commitment ideas aren't laid out as clearly in the first place, and that was one thing that came back from parents, was that maybe if we had clearer proficiency goals that parents could wrap their minds around and their arms around, it would be easier to reach those goals at home, even in English, right? Because some of that mirrors what's going on in English as well. It's both languages.
Because if we had that, if we had the increased communication, as you're saying, then we might actually get more participation.
Right, and to add to that is this concept of assessment and data collection on proficiency growth. Because I know that parents are looking for data that they can fall back on and say, well, look, it's working. I mean, these kids are growing, and their assessment results demonstrate it. So I think it's a little bit of organizing that concept and putting your best foot forward with regard to the incredible things that you're doing.
Yeah, good.
I think from being in the program, I think I've been in it with 4 kids for about 10 or 11 years now. All of your recommendations and your suggestions resonate with me. Good. I'm like, a way to kind of assess their development year to year, it would be incredibly helpful. Ways to kind of change the stigma around Spanish kids versus traditional learners. But I think the thing that resonates the most with me right now is Portrait of a Graduate and this global learning and how we can connect this program with the Portrait of a Graduate. And I think it's going to help us move forward with this program because of our new strategic plan. So.
Absolutely, and I can tell you that in other districts, just taking that concept of global learning and this idea of everyone being a stronger global citizen and applying that using those UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals, I've created entire school-wide initiatives and events that help the students all get involved in understanding what global issues are, how people live in different countries and what works. And I think that by making it a community-wide effort as opposed to focused only on Spanish immersion, you'd see that difference. As well as a language component for all students in the district.
Is there any downside, in your opinion, to moving to a 90-10 model? And what would that be?
I don't think that there's a downside to it. I think that some of the teachers might debate me on that, but I think that that 10% of English support that the students would receive would allow for the teachers to not have the students who need pull-out support to be pulled out of their Spanish language classrooms. I think it would also, I think it provides way more of a positive opportunity, many more positive opportunities than are against it. I don't think there's anything you would lose really in the process. I think there's a lot to gain.
And is there a recommended timetable for like proficiency assessments? Like how often would you recommend that those?
So I think it depends on the school district and how you're approaching things. So again, a lot of the school districts that have been there where we've done measurements and there's been research done are the larger programs that are 50-50 programs across all of Utah, all of Delaware. things like that. So the intervals at which you assess change. Working with the district in Long Island where they're assessing at 3rd grade and 5th grade. And much of the data now shows 3rd and 5th grade are good spaces to assess. I would say the same thing here. 3rd grade being your first year here now where you have any English instruction at all, right? So that it does allow for us to get a baseline on some level in certain areas of linguistic growth.
So can you speak a little bit more to the idea of 2 strands in one school as opposed to 1 strand for the district?
I'd love to see you have 2 strands in both schools. But I'd love to see you have an entire school in immersion as well. But let's talk about the idea of 2 strands versus 1 strand. The idea of having 2 strands in one school is that one of the concerns has always been the same kids are in the same classes with the same kids for so many years, and that develops other challenges. That's true, and it's not only here. That is something you hear in every school district that has an immersion program, whether it's 50-50 or not. If the students are in the same group all the time, all the way through, that starts to happen. I think that having 2 strands in one school allows for you to switch it up a little bit. I think it allows for that type of flexibility. I think it also creates more of a feel like there's a bigger community. They're a part of the community, not an aside or not a side section of the community. I think it gives a little bit more depth to the experience in this school. That's my opinion based on my experiences seeing this happen in many schools. The school that I originally taught in had 1 strand. We experienced lots of challenges because of it. Schools that have entire immersion programs, the whole school is immersion, that you don't see that. You don't see the same problem. However, I will say that I've also seen schools where there is 1 strand in the school and it's done so well because the entire community is focused on the value of global education and language learning that even some of the announcements in the morning, some of the things that happen in the school are all globally focused. And there's some Spanish going through the whole day, and there's a FLES program. When you have those types of things around you, then the 1 strand isn't affected in the same way. It doesn't have the same separating effect that it does when you don't have that. So that there are kids who are all having this opportunity in different ways. And there's a school in Philadelphia that does it exactly that way, where they have a strand that is immersion, and they have a strand that has FLES every day. And there's a portion of language learning every day. And the students all feel like they're part of something because then when they have big school-wide events that are focused on global understanding, they're all a part of it. They all understand the world.
So how would that work exactly? 2 strands in one school. Would you choose one elementary school to host it?
You could,
or
but
how?
I love this recommendation, but I think honestly in our present context, there's just way too many logistical challenges with regard to transportation, but also with regard to size of our buildings. Now, you know, the pendulum has swung from Mendon to Upton, and we're now heavier in the SI program at Memorial. And now we have a delta of almost 200 students between our 2 elementary schools. And part of that has been population growth in Upton versus Mendon. It's a lot of variables. So I love the idea. I don't know if it's a realistic or viable option in our district to actually do that. And you know, and Jay and I have kicked around the idea of, you know, what if you take the whole program and have the whole program just at MISCO? Great idea in theory, but then you get into the consideration of, well, wait a minute, they're going to be at MISCO, and then they're not going to be with their same age peers that are not in the program. So, you know, in a perfect world, yes, 2 strands in one school, and we'd have a lot more space. I don't know realistically how viable it is. If you recall, a matter of 4 or 5 years ago, we were predicting a nice gradual decline. And if you guys recall, a decline in student population, I think because of some of the successes that the district has had, actually in the last 2 years, we've had an increase in student enrollment. So I foresee that being an ongoing challenge.
I want to share one thought about that as well. I think it's important. If you were to keep it with 1 strand in each school, which I understand why there would be a need to do that, I think, again, you've got the other support mechanisms. The expectation that the whole community is invested in the idea of global growth, of language learning, would be one of them. The other thing is that from 3rd grade up, you have the opportunity for the students learning if they're doing social studies in English and English language arts in English, there is the opportunity for a collaborative approach to instruction that allows those students to be in English language arts with some of the kids in the rest of the school. And that does also help with some of the social context and some of the challenges that the community faces with regard to the separation of the students. So there are other ways to approach it. There are several pathways I think we have, but those are just some suggestions that I think would work. Ideally, every kid in the United States should be in an immersion program.
Yeah, that's great. So where do we go from here?
I think we'd be very well served, and myself and Katie and Amanda were kind of kicking around this idea. If you recall, I believe it was last January or February, I think it was January, where we did kind of a Saturday workshop and kind of focused exclusively on the middle school and some of the middle school issues, and heard from Jen and had that conversation around the schedule and ability grouping and so on. I think we would be really well served as a school committee, but also working in conjunction with our SI staff to do kind of a focused workshop. I think Amanda has provided a lot of really rich recommendations. I don't think that they can be done necessarily in 1 year or even 2 years, but I think hearing from our staff and prioritizing and kind of brainstorming what are the strategic directions that we want to go with based upon this report, based upon these recommendations, we'd be really well served.
Yeah. Where do we start?
Yeah.
One other thing I just want to say with regard to your recruitment practices, I still am very moved by the conversation I had with your senior students at the high school that day. They really have learned a lot about being in a situation where they're different. They've really also learned about what it is to have the skills and the ability to communicate with people who are not like you. And they are probably the most articulate recruitment officers that you have. And I would highly recommend getting them out into your community and letting other families that are moving here know about just how incredible it is to be in an immersion program. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
All right. So, next, we move on to the alternative structured learning day pilot proposal.
Okay, well, we're gonna go from Spanish to snow, okay? So I think we started this conversation last spring, a discussion around where we were in recent years with regard to snow days and the end of the school year. And if you recall, I think we had 7 snow days last year. Our last day of school was June 25th. It doesn't necessarily serve well once you get to a certain point in the school year as far as doing those makeup days. It's not pleasant for kids, it's not necessarily pleasant for the staff. So based upon your charge, we've put together a committee to kind of look at, and I intentionally will not use the term blizzard bag, instead it's ASL, Alternative Structured Learning Days, in the proposal. So we've had the opportunity as a committee to meet 3 times, and I'd like to share, for your feedback and hopefully approval, the proposal that's been put in place. So again, the rationale, by the way, that right there is the stuff of my nightmares as a child in the 70s, the Winter Warlock. He turns out okay in the end, though. But the rationale, like I said, the recent history of storm-related cancellation, and as a result, pushing up towards July 1st. As we talked about last year, a change in tone with a new commissioner, basically saying, look, the decision for this lies in the hands at the local level with the school committee. This is not necessarily a State Department of Education decision, which, to be honest, was a pretty dramatic shift from our previous commissioner. And then as we discussed last spring, I think the reality, and this came up a lot from our parents on the committee, the reality of today of working from home and just digital presence everywhere. So the state defines ASL, or alternative structured learning programs, really as something that involves directed or independent study, technology-assisted learning, and so on. And again, I think the key piece is they say that this is in the domain of the school committee for approval. So the analogy that they always use is out-of-state field trips and so on. The kids are not in a traditional classroom, in that structured learning. It's an alternative structured learning program. This type of program, within the last 2 years, has been developed by these districts. There's additional ones now moving forward that I haven't listed there. As you can see, it very much started out in the western part of the state, particularly up north in what is finally referred to as Hill Country. But you're also seeing, Burlington, Melrose, Milford is going with a pilot this year. Other districts starting to look at this very critically. So the Department of Ed does say that school committees, in approving a plan, has to take into consideration, I believe it's 6 parameters. And one, coming up with some basic guidelines of when this type of plan is going to be activated, and ensuring that you have appropriate notification to all of your stakeholders, your students, your staff, your parents, obviously. That in assigning work in lieu of a snow day, that you have clear parameters, clear due dates for all assignments, and that you still have some type of mechanism to offer supports in lieu, in the case if a student's having difficulty. And then you do some type of survey or evaluation to evaluate the effectiveness of the program, okay? If you are doing some type of distance or online learning as part of this, you should have some type of consideration that your students have devices and that they have appropriate internet access. That you are making some type of provision for services to students, special services to students, including special ed, and that there is some structure in place from a guideline perspective that your teachers are available on the day of an ASL program. So with these kind of parameters in place, our committee kind of came up with some basic guidelines of what this would look like. Like I said, we had 44 parents and students who convened, and then we kind of boiled it down to a smaller working group of 18, and then brought it back forward a week ago to finalize the guidelines that you have in front of you. So what does this look like? Okay, so really similar to a lot of districts that have gone with this, we've made the decision that for grades K through 4, it should be a traditional paper-based assignment where a folder goes home with the student. And for our kids in grades 5 through 12, it would be some type of online assignment that would be posted to Google Classroom. We said for maximum flexibility, it could be one of any 3 types of assignments. It could be something that would be considered to be enrichment, okay? That it might not necessarily be in the scope of the curriculum that I'm working now. But say I'm Dan McIsaac and I'm teaching US history, and I found this amazing piece on the causes of the Civil War, a different perspective. And I'm not necessarily at that point in my curriculum, but I find that this is a really great read for my kids and I want them to write a short reaction piece to it, I can use it. Second piece might be a typical assignment that I was going to give to the kids anyway, that fits in the scope and sequence. Or third, it could be part of a larger project the kids are working on anyway. So we see those as maximum flexibility. For all kids, actually, K through 4, we've put in the caveat that it would be assignments for classes that the kids would only have that day. Okay, so here at the high school, where we've got to schedule 7 periods to drop, if the student is dropping that one particular class, then they shouldn't have an assignment for a particular class. Okay? Duration, and I think this is what you were alluding to before, Sean. I think it is reasonable to say, okay, for K through 2, the assignments that are given should be a total duration of about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. For grades 3 and 4, 2 to 3 hours, and 5 through 12, so middle school and high school, 30 minutes per subject that they would have had that day. I think we could have a healthy debate about, is this too short? Is this too long? Is it just right? It's kind of interesting. The first time the committee met, they talked about this, and they said, well, do we have data from schools that have done this? And both Melrose and Ludlow were good enough to support their follow-up studies. One of the issues that particularly came out of Ludlow was the fact that the high school students, you would think they would like this the most. They liked it the least. Why did they like it the least? They got pounded with work. A lot of kids were reporting they were getting 8 to 9 hours worth of work on an ASL day. And I spoke to Todd Gabza, who's the superintendent, and he said, you know, honestly, I don't think it was mean-spirited. I just think in a pilot year, our teachers really wanted to be fastidious about doing this, and they probably went a little on the heavy side. So I think our thinking is, look, that definitely fits in the parameters of a half day, which counts as a full day, but I think there's always going to be variability on how much a student is going to put into it, where there might be an expectation, oh, this assignment only kind of takes a half hour, but the reality will be maybe it's going to take more like 45 minutes or an hour, based upon you don't necessarily have that teacher right in front of you with the feedback, instant feedback, and so on. So the consensus viewpoint was that for a starting point, was a very reasonable duration. So how does this called? Okay, so the vision would be I would make the call on a cancellation day, but I would also announce whether it was going to be an alternative structured learning day. Okay, in some cases it might be, all right, it's morning time, and oops, there's no way we're going to get into school, and therefore I'm going to say no school meant in Upton, but oh, by the way, it's also an ASL day. Okay, so a few caveats. If there is obviously no power or internet anywhere within our communities, it wouldn't be an ASL day, okay? Or if it's in the forecast, oh my God, we've got a nasty nor'easter coming up the coast and it's really, really heavy, wet snow and it's ice, I'm probably not going to call an ASL day if there's a chance that there could be power outages. It may be I announce it well into advance, so we probably will go through the joy of that February-March weather cycle, and where we know, okay, we're going to get clobbered with one storm per week, and I might say, okay, our next snow day, whenever it's going to be, in all likelihood will be an ASL day. So to kind of give our staff members, but also our students and families the heads up that an ASL day in all likelihood will be the next. teacher expectations, and this goes in line with the guidelines, that teachers would have to be on call throughout the day, but throughout the workday, but to designate specifically 2 hours that would be virtual office hours. So that would be if a student or a family emails you or contacts you through Google Classroom or whatever it means, you're going to have a rapid response to a specific question that might be around an assignment. As far as turning in ASL day assignments, students will have a maximum of 5 days to submit those assignments. Okay, and again, this leaves flexibility for teachers because there is a significant debate around, okay, what about the situation where you've got a student in an AP class and the teacher kind of wants to keep the flow going? Okay, that's fine. But what if you have a class where genuinely 3 kids really struggled with some reading or struggled with some aspect of the assignment? There would still be time built in to follow up with the teacher. So if you look at the document, and I'm not going to get into all the specifics, as far as student support services, in a lot of cases, our special educators or our English learner teachers, would have the same types of responsibilities as our regular classroom teachers. However, there are a handful of folks, like occupational therapists or physical therapists, where it really is a face-to-face, hands-on type services being provided to students. So we really feel like it's important to put forward that a good faith effort will be made to make up those services for those students. One of the key components that is a requirement, but we also feel that it's important, is to have a formal evaluation of the program. What's being proposed is just to pilot it for this school year only, and then kind of looking at both quantitative and qualitative measures to measure the effectiveness of this. So one could be taking a look at the completion rate of ASL assignments across various grade levels, the schools in the district. It's kind of interesting. Some of our parents around the table, I think we had some New Hampshire natives. The state of New Hampshire has been explicit in putting the benchmark of 80%. So if you do not get 80% of assignments in, it doesn't count as a school day. Massachusetts has not gone in that direction yet. We felt it was important to be transparent and kind of put in this guideline document that our goal is 80% completion. One thing that some of our parents felt that was very strong, at least initially, is to have some type of measure on each of the assignments where parents could fill in, and particularly for our younger learners, the amount of time that it took to actually complete the assignment. And we would put the verbiage like on task time, not like, okay, they're watching Netflix and simultaneously, making a snack, and on genuine on-task time to ensure that are we staying within the parameters of how long that we've set. I think another important metric, and this would be done in short order after the ASL, but a way to track how many emails did you get in? How many direct messages did you get on Google Classroom to see how much were families or students reaching out to their teachers and so on. And then, as the other districts have done, we would do a comprehensive survey, probably in April after the bad weather season has ended, to kind of get perceptions around how well this works. Okay? So as far as our next steps, I feel very, very strongly, and I have since the first start of this, that it's really important to have everybody on board. So I will be seeking a memorandum of agreement with our Teachers Association, along with our paraprofessional ABA Tech associations, because those are our two associations that are most affected by this. I think one of the things, and I believe it's also in the guidelines document, it's really important to do an assessment to know exactly how many of our families do not have high-speed internet. I'm fairly confident it's not a very large number, but the game plan would be to work with those families. We have worked with families in the past to introduce some very, very affordable options that they could pursue. But I think, if worse comes to worse, I think we could also work with those families, assuming it was a middle school or high school student, to have assignments or something that's viable that could be downloaded in advance as a potential alternative. And then I think, communicate, ensuring that everybody in our community knows about this plan and it's well communicated to all of our stakeholders using email, website, social media, and so on, newsletters and so on. So that's the game plan that we have in place for a pilot. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them.
You may have said this when you were going through it, but when you said the students and families would be asked to estimate like how long it's taking to, is that as they're doing the assignments, like is that continuous feedback, or you're asking for them?
So, for each assignment, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then for the power outages, it says that it will not be called if there's an existing loss of electricity or if there's a substantial threat. So the obvious question is, what happens if you call an ASL and then everybody loses power? Or even like a small, like what's the, is it widespread? Is it localized?
Yeah, I mean, if that were to happen, I would probably just say, well, it's just going to be a traditional cancellation day, traditional snow day, and we'd have to make it up at the end of the year. I mean, realize, I went to the table very conservatively. My initial vision when we started this process was, well, let's put provisions in place that we wouldn't consider this until after 5 traditional snow days, right? Because everybody gets bummed about those last 2 and like, oh, I have to go after Friday, And then I saw the guidance document from the state, and it actually said, well, you might want to consider after 3 traditional snow days. So when we first met on October 16th, or whatever the date was, I said to the committee, well, I'm thinking, maybe we wouldn't put it in place until 3 traditional snow days. And everybody around the table is like, why are you doing that, Joe? Why do you want to hamstring yourself? And there's actually a very cogent rationale for not putting that in place, because people brought up, examples of and I know that this has happened quite a few times on my watch, where you have kind of a big snowstorm, and it's the second day, and it stops snowing by, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, but it's still the cleanup piece. And I'm on the phone at 4:30 in the morning with our 2 chiefs and our DPW directors, and they're like, sorry, the secondary roads are still a little on the hairy side, and you have to end up canceling. So, and then ironically enough, the working group met right around the time where we had that snowstorm in November. And I'm like, So the mindset was very strongly, hey, have maximum flexibility as much as you can. And actually, the more I think about it, I agree with that. So, but realize, in all likelihood, my feeling is this, We probably will still have traditional snow days. There's part of me that I'll probably be a little gun shy on the first one, and I might not call an ASL day. I think you use it judiciously and you use it with discretion.
Joe, excuse me, I'm a little concerned that this might lead to more work for you. You're gonna have to come up with all new singers for kids asking what ASL
Exactly.
versus traditional.
I will take my Twitter trolldom seriously.
How about for teachers who, if you call it an ASL day, but they have their own children and they're required to be on call, like, their kids are home from school as well, would that be a consideration?
So my feeling is this. Let me give you a second hypothetical. And the second hypothetical is, what if the teacher was really sick and the teacher was going to have a sick day anyway? Okay, it's, do we have to come up with sub-ASL plans, a sub-plan for, my feeling is, if they're home with their children, asking for that 2 hours to be reasonably mindful and then also to be monitoring, I don't see that as necessarily a stretch, as something that is unreasonable. I personally think, Diane, that chances are during a traditional snow day, people are probably hopping online at some point during the course of the school day. So I don't see it as anything
I don't even know
that
how
is
many people that
onerous.
affects in our district in terms of what our teacher population is at. I know there are some, I can think of one teacher that has 3 young kids. I just think that would be challenging, but I don't know.
Yeah.
how many people that would affect.
It feels like putting something in place like this, something's going to go wrong. I mean, we got to be honest with ourselves. Something is going to go wrong. But if we don't try it,
Yeah, it's a pilot.
yeah, I mean, this is really exciting to try.
Yeah.
So I'm all for it.
I see it as a step in the right direction. I think we're a district that has invested a great deal of time, money, energy into technology. And to me, in 2018, almost 2019, it's a little silly that we're not doing this. And again, we're not making a proclamation that every single snow day is going to be one of these. And God bless the 44 people that were on my committee. God bless you. They thought of every single possibility, every single type of worst case scenario. And one of the first ones was, oh my God, what are we going to do if we lose power, we lose internet, and so on. And I think we've come up with guidelines that kind of, they don't probably cover 100%, but they cover a lot of it. And I think the reasonable thing is, do I have confidence that our professional staff will provide meaningful opportunities to kind of keep the momentum, to keep the learning going? And that is a lot more productive than sitting in a classroom on June 23rd. Absolutely,
I agree
without a shadow of a
wholeheartedly.
doubt.
I couldn't agree more, because when you cancel school and you tack that day on to the end of the year, the chances of it being actually useful is very, very low. I think that this is a much better alternative.
Well, and also all the schedule stays the same for all of the AP courses and everything. So the less days you get to utilize, the worse it is for the students up against those yearly schedules.
So that's what I got.
Cool.
And put one step in front of the other.
All right, any further questions? Okay, the committee needs to entertain a motion to approve the alternative structured learning day pilot proposal.
Motion to approve the alternative structured learning day.
Before you do that, can I just ask one more question?
Sure.
I'm so sorry. Special needs. What about kids who, I know you talked about the PTOT is obviously hands-on and different, but what about the kid who is now being expected to do work at home without the support that they would have received in school? Like, what are the special considerations that are given for that child?
So, a couple things. So, the expectation of our special educators would be the same as our regular classroom teachers as far as them communicating and then reaching out to their students. And I would say also seeing that the overwhelming majority of our students are receiving their services through an inclusion model would be, I would say, the teacher reaching out to his or her students, but also working in conjunction with the regular ed classroom teacher to ensure that supports are put in place and that they're accessible and so on. I think there's also the piece around, again, if there still is a problem, that there's a mechanism in place once we're back in school, the teacher is working in conjunction with the student to close any type of gap that might exist.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because I think if there's anybody that's going to get left behind, it's the child who's not a traditional learner, and that does need those supports that somebody sitting right next to me can provide. But now, as soon as I need to email that concern, whatever it is, like I'm working on a sheet and I don't get it, now I have to verbalize that and type it to my teacher.
Well,
and he might lose a few kids
and
in
again,
that
we
process.
use the example of email, or we use the example of Google Classroom, because quite frankly, those are the constructs that we're most familiar with. But I think there also has to be an openness. I mean, face it. I think the typical student at NITMA, they'll use email, but they'll use it begrudgingly, right? I think the email is something of our generation. It's definitely not of the kids today. So if there is a mechanism where teachers can reach their kids and reach their kids very quickly, like I know a lot of our NITMA teachers are on Twitter, and they're using Twitter as an instructional tool to post things or to have links to reading and so on. Whatever mechanism you can reach out to kids for that electronic communication, and maybe the kid's working off their phone, that's fine.
And I guess I'm not thinking so much about the older kids. I'm thinking more about the younger kids. That's what's going on in my brain. I'm thinking about the student in second grade that can barely even verbalize what they're struggling with. That's what I'm. And I just think we need to be mindful, and you just address that in terms of the follow-up that happens after an ASL day.
Yes.
That we make sure that kid that was struggling anyways isn't going to be even further behind the class because they didn't have that person sitting next to them, assisting them through the hard process, whatever that process is for them that is much more difficult.
Yeah, and I think what you're going to find, at least for this first one out of the bat, so keep in mind, at the elementary level, you literally have a very nice ASL folder, and that will go home with students. I think you're going to find teachers are going to work in teams in developing a consistent assignment. You know, I was speaking to Deb Swain about what the fourth grade team at Memorial was planning. So I think if there's at least, definitely for the first one, there's forethought about, okay, this is the assignment that we're going to give our kiddos. They can work in conjunction with the special educators for that grade level to think, okay, in advance, what are some supports, or how do we make certain accommodations so
for
this particular
children.
student?
Okay,
Exactly.
that's
So
great.
I think, again, I'm going to be judicious in calling this. I'm definitely going to be judicious about the first one to make sure that we've got that communication and we've got some of those support pieces definitely in place.
And I echo Sean's sentiments. Like, I'm excited about it. I think, again, the value of an ASL versus June 27th is
definitely outweighs. You know, I think there's great potential there, and you're never gonna know if you don't dive in.
Yeah.
So you gotta just jump in sometimes, so.
Yes, just for you, Joe, I think Bumbles still bounce. So.
Okay, any further questions? Shall we read the
All right,
motion,
so
please?
make a motion to adopt the Mercy Alternative Structured Learning Day proposal.
Second.
Okay, any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and it's approved unanimously. Next, we move on to correspondence. Is there correspondence that the committee will see here?
No, to my knowledge, there is not.
Okay, no correspondence. Are there other matters not anticipated by this committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting? Okay. Hearing none, future agenda items include the MERSD Golden Apple Award on January 7th, the MERSD fiscal year 2020 first pass budget on January 28th, and another update on homework,
Yes.
as the member has requested. All right, anything else? Okay, committee will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at 9:02. Thank you.